Hello, BookTube friends and book lovers everywhere. I am here to tell you all about what I read last month, and I will also tell you about what I am still reading and will be reading during February. So, to start with, I finished 5 books last month, and 2 of them were adventures, nonfiction adventures. And one of those was about a group of men who went to the Arctic, and the other was about a group of men who went to the Antarctic. The first one I finished was Labyrinth of Ice, the Triumphant and Tragic Greely Polar Expedition by Buddy Levy. First time I have ever read anything by Buddy Levy, but it will not be the last. I am planning to read his recently published book on a similar topic. Anyhow, let's get back to the Greely Polar Expedition. I'll give you a rundown on what that was about. In case you haven't heard of it, there was a man named Greely, and he decided that he was going to set up a scientific research station in the Arctic Circle. They actually did this at Ellesmere Island, which is the northernmost island of Canada, and it's sort of north of Greenland, so they're way up there, and he was trying to get to the furthest north ever for his time period. Um, he had about 20 men with him. They lived fairly comfortably and were busy doing scientific things up there. However, the supply ships that were supposed to bring them more food and supplies of various types never arrived. And the reason why is because these supply ships got stuck in the ice and had, well, let's just say it wasn't good. They never got to Ellesmere Island. So Captain Greely had to find a way to get his men out of there because they were running out of food. And it was a terrible disaster. The book hit me hard. It was well written. Felt really bad for those men that were up there suffering. And I've been reading this kind of literature for a couple of months now. I've been reading it since I think about November and read about 2 of them every month. And I will be talking more about the survival literature genre that I have been exploring myself. My explorations, thank goodness, they take place in a warm living room instead of in the cold, because I do not deal well with cold. Now, the other book that I finished in January was Endurance, about Shackleton. You've probably heard of it before. Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Journey. And that was by Alfred Lansing, I think his name was. I forgot to put it on my list. Alfred Lansing. This is a book that has been around for a while. What happened was that in 1914, Shackleton, who had already been to the Antarctic a couple of times, not on his own journeys, but with other explorers, he decided that he wanted to cross the Antarctic continent, and he was going to be the first person to actually cross the continent. He had about 20 men with him, and unfortunately, their ship, the Endurance, never reached Antarctica. They got stuck in ice, and it was an ice pack that kept the ship stuck over winter. And then things got worse. Now, they were in dire straits. Of course, they were hunting for, seal, penguin, whatever they could eat. But it was a really terrible situation that lasted for over a year. Of course, there were survivors. Otherwise, we wouldn't know about it. Because just think, if that ship, the Endurance, had sunk in the Antarctic, in the ocean just outside or off the shore of the Antarctic, we'd never have gotten any information about what happened to it. However, because there are survivors and they came home with their journals and wrote books and things like that, we do have a lot of information about what happened, and it is very inspiring. I very much recommend both of those survival books. So the other books that I finished reading in January were two that were epistolary fiction. I didn't do too well on the epistolary fiction January challenge, but I did finish two of them. One of them was this Several People Are Typing, which I already made a video about because I gave it a red flag warning because of all the cussing. Every one of those tabs represents a cuss word. I wouldn't say it was vulgar, but it was just a lot of cussing, like some people speak that way. And a lot of us don't like to read books with a lot of cussing, but I read it because it had a interesting format. Being an epistolary novel, it was written all in Slack messages, and I thought that was new and unique, and I wanted to see what it was like. It's actually not the best plotted. I think it could have been done a lot better. Hope the author will try again and just develop his craft. And then the other one that I finished was Address Unknown, which is now Book Location Unknown. So I'm putting a picture of it here. Address Unknown is a very short epistolary story. I'm going to call it a story because it was really originally published as a short story, and it only took me a few hours to read it. It was in letters between business partners, one of them being in San Francisco and then the other one being in Germany. This happened around 1933, before World War II, and I think it's a book that it's been very popular over the years. That's why this short story has become a book, and I think it's something that everyone should try reading at least once. So I didn't do too well in the epistolary fiction. Let me show you the ones that I didn't finish. So I did start this one, The Examiner. I'm interested in it. It's an interesting little book with various types of epistolary elements, and it's about a group of art students, college level or graduate level art students. So I did not even start Up the Down Staircase, which is something I've been wanting to reread for a long time, and I will get back to it maybe in February. I did not start Dear Mr. Knightley, and I did not start The Diary of a 49er, so I'm going to be continuing on with this pile of books, and it will be during Epistolary February, which nobody else is doing that, but because I didn't finish in January, I do want to try again in February. Put those over there. Let's see, what else do I have to tell you about? Another book that I finished reading in January was Knowing Scripture by R.C. Sproul. If you had asked me at the beginning of the month, what is hermeneutics, I would not have been able to tell you. And I would have been embarrassed because I should know what hermeneutics is, but I just didn't. But now, having read this book with some information for newbies like me about just the basic rules of hermeneutics, I can tell you it is Bible interpretation. So you see, I learned a little something during January, and I did finish this book for the Biblical Studies Challenge. And other books that I have been reading during January, however, have not finished, include Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. This is not something I'm hurrying through, so just a couple chapters a month will do me. I read a little bit more of Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, the father of free verse poetry. This is the original 1855 edition. He added to it all during the rest of his life and ended up with a much thicker collection of poetry, also called Leaves of Grass. And then I have been reading some chapters in Missing 411, Western States. That's by David Paulides. And here's one that I did a DNF on. It is The Long Haul, A Trucker's Tales of Life on the Road. And I am interested in the book, but I was reading so many other books, it was just something I felt I should wait on until I get to a point when I am not reading so many books that this one is just being pushed to the side. So another book I've been reading is, as you know, Forks Over Knives Plan, and I'm on chapter 4 now. And I divided this one into 11 parts, the story of Christianity, and it's my Christian history book, which for the Biblical Studies Challenge, I should have this done around November sometime, so I divided this into 11 parts. And I did finish my January section and am reading this February section now. And then the other book that I have been reading, this one takes up a lot of time, actually. David McCullough's The Path Between the Seas. It is about the Panama Canal, the building of the Panama Canal. Finished section 1, I'm in section 2 now. I'm halfway through the book, which is exactly where I wanted to be at the end of January, so I had scheduled 2 months for this book, and I probably will be able to finish in time. Because next month, our book for the David McCullough read-along is going to be the one about Theodore Roosevelt. So that's my story about January and February reading. Thank you for listening, and I will get back to you in another video, hopefully very soon.